Hi everyone, and welcome to another session of Building Blocks. I'm Judy Brown from the Little Fabric Garden, and I'm here to show you a little project. Well, so it's a little bit more than a little project. It is a quilt, but it's a very easy quilt. I'll give you some background on it first, and then I will show you, how we're going to do it and all of that. So, how this all started, and this pattern is a pattern that I kind of put together a long time ago. I was babysitting for my grandchildren, and when I had the store, and they always were playing in my fat quarter bin, and so one day they had a whole bunch of them, and they were like really wild, and we decided that I was going to make something with it. So I just started working on taking these fat quarters and making these blocks and putting together these wild quilts. And they still have them, and I never even thought to bring them down to the store for this video, because you can just see how crazy wild they are, but they are very, very cute. So I gave this a name, and the name for this quilt is called Strippin' on the Square. Now, it's not going to be risque or anything like that. We're not going to have the police involved in any way, shape, or form. But the quilt itself has strips in it, and it has squares in it, and I just kind of thought it was a catchy little title for it. So in front of me I have a couple of examples, and this is with some traditional fabric. It has bees and stuff in it, and you can see the strips and you can see the squares. And this has been very popular, and really this is my go-to pattern at the store. When I get a collection in, I mean, even if it's like 4 or 5 fabrics, and I will be showing you that here in a minute, but I might put some different things together to do up one of these quilts using the fabrics, because typically the ladies or even the guys that come in and do this, they have a hard time putting together fabrics. So if I show them what the new fabrics look like together with something else, they will buy it more than if it's just sitting on the shelf, because they can't see, some people can't see what you can do with the fabrics. So that's exactly what I did with this one. This bee fabric came in, and I thought it really needed to be showcased, and so I used the fabrics that I had, and then I added a couple from the store also to get the 9 fat quarters that I needed. So this was the one, and then this is done with batiks, and of course it's much brighter. It's the same exact pattern, was made exactly the same, but using the different fabrics, make it look totally different. So usually I do up kits for these, so that they can just come and pick one up and take it out the door. But this is called Strip It on the Square. It's a beginner quilt. As a matter of fact, it might look like it's got a lot to it, but it really doesn't. And usually when we have a beginner class, this is the quilt that I do as a follow-up, because it's just straight sewing. There's no fancy stitches to it, no half square triangles, no flying geese, none of that. It's just straight sewing. So it is definitely a beginner, quilt. So it's not a hard one to try. You might like to do this one. All right, so I'm going to come on back over here, and I'm going to show you the fabrics that we're going to be using in this. And what you need to do this quilt is you need 9 fat quarters. All right, so what I did here is I found the Focus fabric, which is this one, and this is from Henry Glass, and it's called Renaissance Garden, and I ordered in 4 fabrics from that collection, and they are the 4 fabrics that are here, and you'll see them better later. But I took this, and I was able to get all the colors, so then I pulled some of the colors from the store, fabrics that I had from the store, to get this. So these are the 9 fat quarters that we are going to use. And remember, a fat quarter is a piece of fabric that is 18 by 22. It's a 1/4 of a yard of fabric, but instead of being long and skinny, it's short and fat. So those are the 9 fat quarters. Then you're going to need a third of a yard for the inside border, which would be like this here, the inside border. And then you will need a yard and a third for the outside border and the binding. So that's what you need to do the top part of the stripping on the square. And I am going to show you how to cut it and then how we're going to, get it together. All right, the hardest part of doing all of this is cutting this fabric, and that's not really hard at all. You will cut your fat quarters all the same. They are going to be cut all the same. So I pulled one of the fabrics over here to the cutting board, and I'm going to show you how to cut one of them. I've already cut the other ones. I did it to, for time's sake. So when you go to do this, and that's what I do all the time, I stack them up. I'll put maybe 4 of them together. Now you have 9, so you could do 3, 3, and 3 if you worry about stacking too many up. But you definitely need a new blade in your rotary cutter if you're going to do that, because you don't want it like sticking to that bottom one and not cutting through it. But it goes a lot faster if you do stack them up. So here is your fat quarter, and you can see it's 18 inches by about 22. And I'm going to show you how you cut it. And all of these instructions are in the pattern, which the library will have. It will be online, and I will also have it here at the store if you want to stop in and pick it up. All right, what I want to do, if you notice, this side is not straight. It's going, it must have been the way I cut the previous piece. I'd like to blame it on someone else, but I guess I can't. So I'm going to straighten this side out the best I can, and then we will go on. Okay. And I have a hard time because I'm very short, and I have very short arms, and so it's hard for me to get across the table. So I'm not really laying on the table and falling asleep. All right, so here we go. Straightening out that and get this out of the way. And then I'm going to move this over just a tad bit. And so the first cut I'm going to do is at 6.5 inches. I'm going to do a 6.5 inch strip, and then I am going to cut 3 2.5 inch strips. So I'm going to do the first one, 6.5. And I'm going to move that out of the way. And then I'm going to do 2.5 inch strips. Now I like to measure from my ruler. Some people measure from the board, but the board can get distorted after many times cutting on it. So, but the ruler can't. So I like to do like the cuts that I can use with my ruler. I like to do them with the ruler. So as you can see, I've gone over. There's 1, 2, 2.5. So I'm going to cut 3 strips. 2.5. So there's 1. 2. And 3. All right, so you're going to end up having a piece left over. Now this piece you can put in your stash if you want to, but sometimes I use this as a binding, so if you get to the end and you look at it and you think, oh, I've got this, all this fabric left, you could, cut it into 2.5 inch strips again, and then you could sew the different ones from the different patterns together, and usually you have enough to do, put the binding in, if you didn't want to use the fabric that I suggested for the binding. So there's a couple different ways you can do that, but I'm just going to move this out of the way, get that out of here, and so now we have our 3 strips. Okay, I'm going to move those over here. I'm going to take my 6.5 inch strip and I'm going to turn it sideways. I am going to make sure that this side is straight. Well, I think I'm going to turn it this way. All right. Yep, and it is pretty straight. So now what I want to do with this one is I am going to cut it into 6.5 inch squares. So I will do this, and you will, when you do that, you get 3 of them. All right, so you will have, well, let's get that in there. All right, we'll go into 13. And then 19 and a half. Okay, so here's my extra stuff. This is garbage. Slide this out of the way, and here we have the 3 squares. All right, so I am going to get all of the other fabrics over here, and I'm going to show you how I pick the strips that are going to go together. All right, so here in front of me are all of the strips that I cut from all of the different fabrics from the 9 fat quarters. So each one of them has 3 different, there's 3 different cuts for each one. When I first started doing this, I would lay them out like this, and then I would just kind of pick and choose, and I'd put them together. And then what would happen is at the end, I would end up having like 2 of the same left over because I didn't like those quite as well as I liked all the other ones. And then my last strip set that I would put together would have 2 of one fabric, and it was like, no, I don't like that. So I decided that I was going to do it this way. And so how I do it is I start over on one side, and we need 3 of the fabrics together to make a strip set. So I end up doing this. I take the first 3 and I pin them together, and so now I know that these go together. So instead of starting over here and going this way, I started the second one, and I take these 3 and I pin them together. All right. Now I go to the next one, and that's my first one. Oh, look, no more on that one, so I can't use that guy anymore. All right, so these are going to go together. Pin it. And when you have these pinned and they're ready to go, it makes it a whole lot easier when you go to sew them. All right, so then this is going to be, I love this fabric. It is so pretty. It's so springy, which we all need right now. 2 degrees at my house this morning. I wasn't really happy about that, so spring stuff looks good. All right, so then this. And they just continue in this way until I use them all. All right, so here are the 3 strips. I'm going to start with this one because, of course, like I said, I love this fabric, and I want to do that one first. I am going to get these sewed together, and then I'm going to show you how these get cut. And then just remind you that you will be doing the same thing for all of the strip sets. All right, so I'm going to take the first 2, and I'm going to put them right sides together, like we always do. And since it's like a straight piece, I'm not going to pin it, but please, if you decide you want to do it, go right ahead and pin it. And I'll probably be sorry that I didn't, but I'm just not going to pin it for time's sake. All right, so again, we are using our 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we are going to sew straight down. Make sure they stay straight and keep those edges the same. Whoops. Get a little lead foot here. It looks like it's slipping a little bit, so I'm going to grab it and move it over just to make sure that it stays where it's supposed to be. And of course, if I had pins in there, I wouldn't have to worry about that. Okay, so we are at the end. And I don't know what I did with my little scissors, but, all right, so now we're going to sew this one to this. And I don't know if you remember, I do know that I've said this before, but we started up here at the top when we sewed the first two. When we do this one on, when we add this one to the strip set, we're going to start sewing from this side. Because if you don't do that, then your fabric starts to get like an arc in it, and it kind of looks like a little fish hook, and then you have to keep straightening it up, and you end up losing lots of fabric. So if you do it that way, alternate your starting where your start place is, then that alleviates that problem. So this guy is going to come up over top on here, and I'm going to start down here at this end, and again, no pinning, and I'm just going to sew that together. All right, let's make sure they stay straight. Going quite as fast this time when I've got to worry about this other fabric sticking out of the side here. Almost done. So we've got that done, and I just wanted to say that when I am doing those strip sets, and I'm one that likes to cut all my strings. My friends in Florida always they always laughed because I was always yelling at them to cut their strings because those threads are just a pain. But anyway, when I'm doing these strip sets, I do leave them in until I get it done, because I want to remember where I started from. And so I know that, you know, like when I started here, I always have, you know, thread, and then the same thing when I go the other way, you know, and if I've got that thread. So I know that this is where I started on this strip set, so if I was adding more to it, I know that the next time I would start here. It's just a way for my old brain to remember where I am and what I'm doing. But right now, I'm going to get rid of them because they do drive me crazy. Okay, so, and I will take them to the, take it over to the ironing board, and I am going to press them, and I'm going to press them all going one way. All right, so here's my strip set, and it's all sewed together. And you can see on the back that I have pressed them all going one way. All right, so now what I need to do is I need to cut these into 6.5 inch squares. When you sew the 3 2.5 inch strips together, it ends up being 6.5 inches. And since these are 6.5 inch squares that we have over here, these also need to be 6.5 inches. But if you look, you can see that this is not straight. So here again, I need to straighten this up, and I'm going to do it here in the middle because I don't want to mess with my fabrics for my next strip sets. So I'm just going to do it like that, slide it over a little bit, so I get a straight cut here. And I'm going to get my ruler and my rotary cutter, and I'm going to straighten up this side. Okay, so I got that straight. Move this out of the way. Oops, I do have a garbage can. Okay, now I'm going to slide it over so that it's right over to the end. And here again, I am going to cut at 6.5, then 13, and then 19.5. And that will give me my 6.5 inch squares. 13. And over to 19 and a half. And that will give us 3 6.5-inch squares. Okay. So here are our squares made with our strips. And then I will put them in a pile. And I pin them so I don't lose them. And I will do the same thing to the remaining strip sets. We'll sew them together, alternating your starting points. And when you get done with the strip set, then, you know, cut it into 6.5-inch squares. Okay, so that part is done. And now we're back over here with these guys with our 6.5-inch solid. And I'm going to lay them out, and I'm just going to show you what I did. Each row in the quilt has 3 of the 6.5-inch squares, solid squares. Okay, and so I'm going to do basically the same thing that I did there, and I'm just, you know, kind of show you here, and then. All right, so I'm going to take one of these, and one of these, and one of these, and pin those together. All right, and do the same thing. Start with this next one. Go here, here, and remember, these are going to be the ones that are in the rows. Now, I will also tell you that when you do this, these don't have to be in certain row. Like, you know, maybe this one you put as the second row, and this might be the first row. And it doesn't make any difference. And again, when you do it, and we'll kind of talk about this again later, that once you lay everything out, like you lay your squares out, and then you lay your strip squares out, and you look at it and you're like, ooh, I don't like the look of that. I need to move this one here, or I've got too many green here, or too many pink here. You can move anything around once you get it done. This is just to get you to that point, you know, just to get you to that point. And then you can change the way you do it. So you just continue the same way, and then you get, you know, you have all your pieces, and we'll have all our pieces ready for the next time. So I hope you tune in for our next part of stripping on the square. And I better not find you over in the square stripping either. I'm not talking about that. So see you the next time.